Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back to our video series of February 2025 Quran and Belief. This is in the third episode of this video series. And if you were to see, there's quite a difference between the third episode and the second episode. Reason being, of course, there's one extra person in this podcast. And whenever we have many guests, when it comes to our podcast, we always get very excited because we kind of come from different backgrounds, we're part of different organizations. And today we are very, very happy to welcome Brother Zidny from NUS Muslim Society, part of which is QTIO, which is Quran, the Immense Ocean, that he is part of. And we are also again joined by Brother Ijaz, who is from NUS MS, Islamic Awareness Society as well. So, the first two episodes, you guys probably heard a little bit from me and Brother Ijaz. So, I'd like to kind of get Brother Zidny to introduce himself a little bit before we jump back into the video series. And this actually was a big coincidence, or rather opportunity from Brother Ijaz. After the recording of the second episode, he came out and said, "This series is amazing what we're doing. I know a brother that will be so interested to be involved." And a few weeks later, a few messages later, here we are. So Alhamdulillah, that we managed to get this kind of arranged. So, Brother Zidny, you're part of QTIO. Tell us a little bit about QTIO, the part that you play in it, a little bit on kind of your vision for the initiative, and indulge yourself in letting the viewers know about your initiative.
Assalamualaikum everyone. Yes, I'm Zidny and Alhamdulillah, very honored to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Brother Ijaz and Brother Siddiq. So QTIO stands for Quran, the Immense Ocean. We are one of the many ad hocs of NUSMS, and we are an ad hoc that aims to provide a safe space and an environment for students on campus or anyone to come and attend our events and learn more about the Quran from proper asatiza, certified asatiza, to clarify their doubts and get a better connection to the Quran. So for this year, our team is actually going from ilm, knowledge, to amal, right action. So how we did that across the year was, firstly, we defined what the Quran is, what is it in its essence, knowing a bit of its history, how it was preserved, how do we know it's the truth and all that. And then we moved to knowing what are the methodologies, is there proper ways to engage with the Quran, when you recite it, when you reflect upon it, are there methodologies and principles to adhere to. And once we did that, we encourage the participants to engage with their practice of the Quran. And for our latest event, we addressed some of the struggles that the participants had. So we managed to have quite a lengthy Q&A. There were so many questions, but we still didn't manage to answer everything. But inshallah, we will get back to that. Going from the amal is only proper if the ilm is proper. So that's what we wanted to convey this AY. Yeah.
Alhamdulillah. I wanted to kind of go off a slight tangent here, and I'm interested to know what made you join QTIO, and like by extension, what will make someone keen to join your initiatives?
So I personally came from a madrasah background, so the Quran was always somewhere in my life. However, when you reflect upon it, you feel like there are different types of people when with regards to the Quran, right? Some don't read and some don't feel the connection yet. But for, I think, a lot of the madrasah graduates, you feel that you kind of read it here and there, but you don't really have the strong connection or like a really personal relationship with the Quran. And one of my friends was inside the committee previously, and he was the one who invited me to join. And from what I saw, the committee was quite tightly knit, and they all really enjoyed the process of calling people to the Quran lah. So I hope to have a little bit of the barakah in that kind of committee, so that I can also forge a stronger relationship with the Quran. So yeah.
So you say, like, if anyone wants to explore different ways of interacting with the Quran beyond like the traditional ways of just learning how to recite the huruf, reciting the Quran, we connect to the Quran in many different ways. One is understanding the Quran through tafsir, things like this. Another way is the tadabbur of the Quran, and many ways that we try to do so. And QTI is just an initiative that allows people to explore different ways of interacting with the Quran.
Exactly.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Okay, great. Okay. And I love the statement that you made, from ilm, then that's where amal is born. And today, I think within this video series, we go even a step before that, your ilm, your knowledge, which informs you about the nature of something. It's only possible when the source material that you get your knowledge from is something that you can believe in. There's yaqeen, which is certainty in it. For if let's say there's no certainty in the source of your learning, like for example, if the teacher you're learning from, you're not sure whether they are credible or they have learned themselves or the information they're giving is credible, then within what you learn, there are a lot of doubts, right? And of course, Quran is given as a guidance to all mankind. So in this video series, we aim to kind of cover the gaps of certain doubts that people have, or even certain doubts that all of us have about the Quran. If we are not able to encapsulate some of the concepts that we are going to discuss in this video series. Sometimes we wake up in the morning, although we've learned about the Quran, but we wake up in the morning, our heart just says, can we fully believe in the Quran? Right? There still might be some doubts. And one of the sciences of Quran, one of the sciences in Islam is to provide this medicine for the Muslim community, the Muslim Ummah, at large, the medicine to cure these doubts, right? And this isn't necessarily knowledge that will bring you to the next level in the connection with your Quran. That would probably be done through your own reflections and things like this. But medicine means that when there is doubt, this particular bunch of knowledge comes in to settle your heart, right? So that you can have the proper foundation to move forward, right? So, and if you think about it, in today's world, like a lot of us need that medicine, right? There's so much doubt in today's world, and hopefully, in these short videos and episodes, we try to kind of provide a little bit of that medicine. And of course, we know that this is an ongoing conversation. Questions might be addressed today, and tomorrow more questions will come up. And that's why we are very happy to have partners like IES and QTIO, and of course, ourselves as Converse Central. If there are any further questions, any further doubts, then go to these organizations, for any of your needs, inshallah. And I'll just do a very short recap what we had with Ijaz in the past two episodes. We talked about what is a divine text, right? And essentially, the main doubt when it comes to the Quran for someone to understand the Quran is, can I believe that Quran is divinely revealed, for mankind? And what differentiates the Quran from other sources of text, not just other religious sources like the Bible, but like even just a storybook, a very well-written book by a very intelligent author. How does the Quran differentiate itself from that, or what differentiates the Quran? And then we talked about, hey, you know what, if we're going to say that a particular text is divinely authored, then there must be some criteria, and if you were to ask a reasonable person, a person with well intentions, to say what would be your own criteria to judge whether a text is divinely authored or not, there probably will be a few criteria, and we kind of shortlisted 10 criteria that are relevant to kind of screen whether a text would be divinely authored or not. Within the first two episodes, we spoke about two criteria. The first one is that the text itself must claim that it is from God, right? And we use the examples of, nowadays we have like songs and movies and books, right? And some of these songs go on to be critically acclaimed. They win Grammys and they become like, Book of the Year and things like this. But most of the time, they are released and then people give them reviews and say, hey, this is like the best movie of the year, right? Rarely you would see a song or a book or a movie within the movie itself to claim that, hey, I'm the movie of the year, right? And then it actually comes true for it to be. Whereas a divinely inspired text, should have the claim within the text itself, right? If the text itself doesn't claim it to be of divine authorship, then it loses one of the strongest basis for it to have that claim. It cannot be that others have claimed that this text comes from God, but it itself doesn't claim for it to be. You cited many examples in the Quran that claims itself to be a guidance, a divinely revealed text for mankind. And secondly, we spoke about how it is unique as well, that any divinely inspired text, because of the divine nature of where its source is, it is unique. Like nothing other than divine can produce such a text, right? And hence, if it's able to be imitated, then it nullifies the divine attribute of it. And we also discussed in the second episode, examples of it. And yeah, we know to today that the Quran has issued a challenge, to the whole of mankind for 1,400 years, to come up with a chapter or a verse like this, and we have been unable to do so. So there are actually 8 principles, or rather criterion left. We'll try to discuss 4 today. And the 4 that we're going to discuss, I will just briefly state them first. The first one is that a divinely inspired text must contain absolute principles. The second one is that there must not be any inaccuracy or discrepancy. The third will be, it must contribute to the well-being of mankind at all levels, not just at one particular aspect. For example, financially, it shouldn't just contribute at that one aspect. And last but not least for today, we're going to be talking about prophecies as well. One of the strongest indicators that a text is divinely sourced or divinely authored is that there will be prophecies that are provided for mankind to assess the text. And these prophecies must prove to be true, right? So let's perhaps jump into the first one. We talk about absolute principles, and like maybe for Ijaz and Brother Zidny, um, absolute principles are essentially principles that must remain true and applicable. Today just like in the past and in the future. So, meaning if let's say a particular principle was given to a nation or a group of people, right, and over time cultures change, norms change, traditions change, and it becomes irrelevant, then that wouldn't be an absolute principle, right? I'd like to ask you guys, like, any absolute principle that you guys know of, or you guys have a resonance to that the Quran teaches us, ever since it was revealed. And of course, all of the ideas that Quran has proliferated, they are still relevant today. But is there anyone that speaks to you guys that you guys particularly like talking about, or relating to?
Okay, I think the question is a good one, and I would just like to, before I share the principle that I think that is the one that I hold most dear to, I think what Brother Siddiq has mentioned with regards to objectivity of the Quran and the absolute principles is really true, because nowadays you see a lot of people, society is what guides morals and ethics are subjective, yeah, based on what is the social norm of that time. However, the Quran guides us. It's the principles are etched for time forever until Qiyamah. So the thing about the Quran, it's rooted in truth and it's true. So it's not just true, but it's rooted in truth as well. So these two are very important, and because of that, it projects the worldview that we are supposed to see the world with. The Quran is the lens that we should see the world with, right? It's the vision of reality and truth that we need to see. So for me, I think the principle that I hold really dear to is the concept of justice or adil. And adil, if you were to talk about it as a concept in Islam, is really putting things at its proper place. Not just when we hear the word justice, I think we usually think about the court of law and all that, but it really is justice to really the minute. Even putting things in the proper place. A small example could be throwing away the litter in the rubbish bin. That's really a small one. And then a big one is really putting, for example, the Prophet ﷺ in his proper rank and proper place, and how we treat him, how we are supposed to love him. And then justice even to our parents. Yeah, and I think there's a very, very good quote, I think, from the Royal Laureate Professor of Malaysia, Tan Sri Dr. Saimon Manoki Baratas, where he says that insofar as justice is concerned, it begins with the self and ends with the self. Yeah, so when you are just to yourself, it will propagate throughout the community. Everyone is just, and then propagates to the country, to the environment, to all the kingdoms, the animal kingdom, the plantations, everything, all of these worlds will be in a just state in the world. Yeah, so I think justice is probably one of the really important themes and principles that we need to think about, like in Islam, deeper.
Yeah. I really love that. And like, it in the Quran itself, just like what you said, we talk about justice, but the concept of justice to men has existed for long. But a lot of things, a lot of people also miss the fact that Quran asks us to be just to the animals, to the environment, to the plants, right, to the world that we're living in. And only just recently, in the past 100, 200 years, do modern men start to come into the conceptualization that we need to have some responsibility to the environment. Well, of course, we learn in school, the CFCs, the ozone layers and things like this. And then we start coming up with policies to prevent the environment from breaking down. And then nowadays we talk about being environmentally friendly, we have to recycle, but yeah, we know, in the Quran, and of course, even in the example of the Prophet ﷺ, Prophet Muhammad said, do not waste a drop of water, even if it's from a flowing river, right? And these are things that have been reviewed, shared 1,400 years ago. Things don't change, but yet only nowadays, in the past decade or past few hundred years, only then we are rediscovering these principles as modern men, right? So this is a very, very good example of what absolute principle is, something that stands true to the test of time. And what about you, Library? Just like any principle for you that you'd like to share?
Inshallah. I think Brother Zidny made a very good point about the Quran being a lifestyle for us. It's not just a book of knowledge, but It's more of a guide for us to follow, to use to live a very good life. So I think for me, I would say one of the main principles that I hold dear to my heart is forgiveness, because it's one of the few values that is very easy to have, but very difficult to master. Like you may think that you forgive someone, but inside you still may hold grudges, you still may hold hard feelings against them. So it's not being forgiving and having forgiveness for the things around you is not easy, I would say. And more importantly than having forgiveness for others, I think it's very important to have forgiveness for yourself. Because if you look at the book itself, the word forgiveness is mentioned so many times in the Quran, and then there's a lot of hadith surrounding Allah Subhanahu wa Taala being forgiving. In fact, every single surah in the Quran except for one starts with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allah calls himself the most forgiving. So with that being so emphasized in the Quran, I think that it's very important that everyone, all of us should try to incorporate forgiveness into our lives. And inshallah make us a better person.
Alhamdulillah. And truly, I think I personally also experienced, I think all of us experience it, like we have instances in our life where, for me was before I became a Muslim, you try to forgive, and forgiveness comes very differently after you embrace Islam and things like this. And I remember one of the biggest principles that really kind of shook my heart was when, in the Quran, Allah addresses the incident where Sayyidatina Aisha's name was slandered by one of the men who was spreading rumors about her. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr, radiallahu anh, he was the maintainer of the person that was spreading these rumors. And essentially, Sayyidina Abu Bakr was giving him money to spend for his needs. And yet, this was the same man that was slandering his daughter, right? So, of course, Sayyidina Abu Bakr, radiallahu anh, he's such a merciful man, right? And he didn't seek any punishment. And whereas in times like this, when slander is made against a chaste woman, in the Islamic law, there can be quite serious consequences for such a man. All he did, what Sayyidina Abu Bakr, was that he stopped giving money to this man. He stopped supporting this man financially, right? And then the verse was revealed in the Quran, and Allah's revealed in the Quran. He says that, forgive, for you would want the forgiveness of your Lord, of Allah, right? And that kind of changed things, and for me, it totally changed the concept of forgiveness, that you would want to forgive someone. Of course, some people are repentful, some people deserve forgiveness or whatnot, but the main reason is because you want Allah to forgive you, right? That's the main reason why you want to forgive someone, regardless of whether the person deserves forgiveness or you're able to forgive, you think he should be forgiven. No, like, forgive, for you want Allah to forgive you, right? And I think that's so beautiful because it addresses the fact that, hey, like, as man himself, we are so limited in capacity. Like, emotionally, we are so limited. To forgive someone out of our own capacity is so difficult. Yeah, Allah brings the divine, or God brings the divine to say, hey, like, you want divine mercy. So from there, allow yourself to forgive someone else. And I think that's such an amazing example. And again, these ideas, was reviewed 1,400 years ago. I like to just bring into kind of perspective here, like, even just 200, 300 years ago, the legal age for marriage in societies around, our region, like 10, 11 years old, some regions in America, even up to 9 years old, they were able to marry, just 200, 300 years ago. And yet the shift of values of society, the shift of the practices and the traditions of society has made it such a fact that in today, 2025, if someone were to marry someone else who was age of 9 or 10 years old, it would be like, you would call that person a sexual predator, right? And so, like, 1,400 years ago, if a man were to reveal such principles, with the limitation of, such a principle being man-made, right? Many of these principles will probably be discarded and changed, right? But the case has exactly been opposite. And in many societies, you think about it, when we say we want change, they're always going to we need new ideas to revitalize our society. And things like feminism, things like this, these are new ideas that came to shake out societies. Yet for us Muslims, we always say we need to return to the Quran, we need to return to the Sunnah. Right? What better way does that show that the principles that these two sources bring to our ummah, they are absolute principles that we always need to go back to. Right? That is the core of what Muslim reform is as well. So beyond what you guys have shared, like things like, the equity of women, the rights of women that was brought by the Prophet Muhammad, that was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad by God, right? These were ideas that were completely opposed to the practice of the Arabs. This was something that an Arab man would not have the capacity to come up with himself, because he was living in the Arab society that such an idea was unheard of, right? But yet he came and he came with Tawheed, right? He came with the Tawheed that firstly said, hey, like worship one God and that your God is Allah. And then he came with ideas that no Arab man would have thought of at the point of time. They were bearing daughters, and yet he said, no, women shouldn't be treated like an asset. They should own assets, right? And these things were undermined until, of course, Islam gained victory within the region. And now today we are rediscovering these principles again. So, to the claim that Islam contains absolute principles, this is quite clear in and of itself. And one of these criteria that we brought up of the 10, of course, the Quran meets it, right? And let's go on to the next few. The next two are shorter ones that we can compress. The next one is that any divine text should contain no discrepancy or inaccuracy, and easily so, because any text of the divine cannot contradict any of the attributes of the divine, right? And we know God, in most credible understandings of God, he is all-knowing, right? And he is perfect in his wisdom. If he were to alter any sort of inaccuracy or discrepancy, then it will not be worthy of the attribute of God. So in the Quran itself, God says, in the fourth chapter of the Quran, An-Nisa, in the verse 83 of the chapter, it says, would they not reflect upon the Quran, had it been from anyone other than Allah, who we know to be God, they would have surely found therein much disagreement or inaccuracies. So I'll combine that with the third point that we're talking about today. The third criteria we're talking about today would be that, whatever divinely authored text must contribute to the well-being of all mankind at all levels. So unlike any other books, a book that is known to be revealed from God as a guidance shouldn't just appeal to one class of person. It shouldn't just appeal to a group of people at one certain time or a certain place. It must, and this is a criteria that must appear in the text itself. It must appeal and benefit to all class of people, regardless of their intellectual levels, their time and their economic levels, and wherever they live, right? So I would like to ask you guys, within your own experiences with the Quran, do you guys have any like points of time where you guys had doubt on what the Quran had revealed? Like any doubts on any principles or any fact, historical fact, scientific fact that the Quran had revealed, which later on you found out to be, hey, like this was actually true, And I'd just like to tap on any of your experiences if that happened in the past for you guys. Or I would like to also ask, share one aspect of your life that the Quran has benefited. It can be mental wellness, spiritually, even of course, like we know like great Muslim scientists used to study the Quran to find scientific discoveries. So for us, we probably have our own ways in which we discover the Quran for ourselves. What has been your process with the Quran?
Anytime thing.
Bismillah.
Maybe then I'll go first lah.
Yeah, sure.
InsyaAllah. So I think on the topic of discrepancies itself, the important thing that we need to think about first thing, our reflex, right? Whenever we see any discrepancy according to what we think, not according to what the Quran is conveying, the first thing it should be to have a good opinion of the Quran and have the good opinion of Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala when we engage with these things, right? Our first instinct should be, okay, I have doubt. Yes, I have doubt. But where is this doubt coming from? Like, where is the place of this? What is the intention behind this doubt, right? And then that doubt will then propel you to what course of action are you going to take, right? So, I mean, technically, any doubt that we have or any discrepancy that has been brought up, or is high chance probably been debunked by a scholar already by now, because that's how concrete the Quran is. But maybe one example that I would think about is when you were mentioning about the rights of women in Islam, how they are elevated in society because of the Quran. There's also another verse in the Quran, I think Surah Nisa as well, if I'm not wrong, whereby there is the word Boraba used to represent the word beat, right? In English, it's called beat. So it's said to beat the woman. So if you put it like that without context, when I first read it, I was like, I thought the Prophet bring up the status of women, then why now are we talking about beating them, right? Like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But Alhamdulillah, because of where I am and the teachers that surround me, instead of like, Islam real or not real, We still had the doubt, but you have a good opinion, you approach the right people, the right asatiza, and you ask them, what does this verse mean actually, you know? And it's not my place to make tough say of the verse right now, but basically doroba doesn't mean what we think it means, right? And there's a specific context, everything. That one is on our part to go and learn it. But my point is just to, whenever we come across these verses, assess where your intention is coming from, and then from there you will get the right answers. If your intention is to get the truth, you will get to the truth. Yes, if your intention is to debunk Islam for whatever reason, then Allahu A'lam, you will get what you will get lah. So that's
I would like to kind of build upon that as well. Like I remember there was a question that was posed in one of the Islam Q&A sessions. I will not mention which scholar, but you probably know which scholar, because brother asked a very good question. The question was like, how do you believe in certain parts of the Quran that isn't it been able to prove yet, right? And so this particular scholar answered, yeah, perhaps in some parts of the Quran we have not been able to reach the point where I will prove it. Some prophecies of the Quran might not come true as of yet. Right now we don't see it, right? But he was saying, he posed a question back like, what would you rather believe in, right? That in a text that has 90% of its scientific facts and historical facts, prophecies coming proven to be true, and yet 10% is ambiguous, or would you rather believe that this text is false, right? And so he says he would rather believe that the entire text is true given the statistics and the numbers, right? So perhaps in parts of your life, doubts might come up, definitely, right? But at the same time, where is the source of the doubt? Like Brother Zin mentioned, is it because you don't know properly? And especially in our region, we don't know Arabic. We don't understand Arabic. We might know or understand certain words of Arabic, but we don't know how the Arabic language is used, the modern Arabic, and not to mention classical Arabic. So of course, when that happens, then the first assumption then you should take would be, hey, perhaps I don't know enough, right? And when you go and make a serious inquiry about it, you realize that most of these things have been debunked, if not all have been debunked by proper scholars with credible knowledge. So definitely, I think again, we are trying to appeal to anyone that has doubts, but yet coming from a reasonable standpoint, with good intentions, and just trying to get to a sincere conclusion, right? And we would then push the same the same principle that Allah has pushed out. If you were to then think about this Quran, could this have been revealed by anything other than the divine, right? If it was not, then you would have found many disagreements, inaccuracies, but you don't, right? So could this have been any other than the divine, right? And but Ijaz, I would love to hear from you. Any like experiences for yourself, or how did the Quran impact you in terms of your different aspects of your life?
Okay, so as in what Brother Zidny mentioned was very true. Like when he was talking about the discrepancy, he actually took over my point because I wanted to talk about it's not the more like common issues that we talk about. The word strike itself, what it actually means. So as in like what you mentioned, there's a lot of scholars that have debunked the what many people think what the word strike means lah. So I feel like similar to what he said, there are a lot of ambiguity with the words that is used. Because when you look at it from a person who is colloquially speaking Arabic throughout their life, right?
Yeah.
When you translate it to English or a different type of language, the words won't be exact same. You have to find the most similar word to kind of use it in place of that actual Arabic word. So because of that, meanings can change. Meanings can be ambiguous. And that leads to all this misunderstanding that comes up. So yeah, there has been a lot of scholars who have debunked all the wrong misunderstandings. And one point I actually want to bring up is there's a ayah in the Quran. It's in chapter 51, verse 47. It goes right. Let me see if I can find it over here. Yeah, so it says, we built the universe with great might and we are certainly expanding it. So this is one of the more common ones that many would know. So, because it was quite recent that scientists found out that the universe is expanding.
Yep.
So this in itself is one of the biggest proof that the Quran is a divine revelation by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this was released so many years ago and He already said we are expanding the universe. And right afterward, it follows up with the next ayah. As for the earth, we spread it out. How superbly did we smooth it out? So this at first I didn't understand. And then I was scrolling to TikTok when one video popped up, and then they were saying, like, you can see so far as to the horizon, but you can't see further than the horizon, and everything is smooth until it reaches the horizon. So they were making sense of this ayah together with what they were saying. So it was kind of interesting. So I think it was these like little thing little like things that really started making me interested and wanting to know more about the Quran. And then you really start to pick up, and then you read through the translations and everything. So the first time I got into reading the Quran was in NS. I really had nothing else to do, and then I wanted to do something useful with my time. So I'm like, I've been so out of touch with Islam for so long. Let me do something. So I went to Wardah Books and got a $15. It was a Quran translation in English. It was a very small book.
The blue color there, what?
It was brown. Yeah, thick. Yeah, that one. Yes.
Wow.
So I got that, and then I started reading it on the way to work and stuff, and it really changed my life because there were so many instances like I could relate with in my life, because there's a lot of ayah about disbelievers saying this and saying that, and a lot of hypocrites, and I could see it actually happening in my daily life. And when you look at, for example, the fifth criteria you mentioned, which contributes to the well-being of mankind, you can find countless ayahs in the Quran talking about feeding orphan, feeding the needy, giving tax and everything. So all these, there's no way you can argue against doing all these acts, because each and every act that is mentioned in the Quran is to help mankind become a better person. So alhamdulillah, I think that's how I've slowly started to see why and how the Quran is important to me in my life.
Yeah, and it's truly so amazing, like the Quran. And we go on to realize that normally when the Quran establishes a certain fact, and in the field of science, there will be points of time where science contradicts with the facts of the Quran. Like for example, for a long time, people didn't believe in the verse of the Quran that kind of insinuates the Big Bang. Right? They thought that the universe had different ways of formation until the discovery that space was expanding, right? And then they trace back to realize that if space is expanding at a rate that is increasing, right, then there rationally should be a point where space came from, where there must be a center of that expansion. And that's where the theory of the Big Bang came about. And that's when they then discovered the truth within the verse of the Quran that spoke about the Big Bang, right? And even in today's day, there are still certain parts of science that seems to contradict. And we say seems to contradict because eventually our belief is that eventually everything that is stated by the Quran will come to fruition as truth, right? So this is one like of the miracles of the Quran, and we can do so much to cover it. We would highly recommend pick up any of the books that talk about the miracles of the Quran at Wardah Books. You would find hundreds of examples, right? And to the examples that are to the T, right? Geographical examples, historical examples, scientific examples, right? And it's not exhaustive. New things are being added day and day. And with regards to the last point, in regards to the well-being of all mankind, we spoke about this in the second episode that we had recorded. And when someone strives to write a book, be it or whichever scholar, whichever field, right? They have an idea on the kind of book they're gonna write. It's a historical book, okay, history book, geography book, okay, a book of biology. Historians will write history of different civilizations. But how would you then categorize the Quran? Right? You wouldn't say the Quran is a textbook. You wouldn't say the Quran is simply a book of religion because it talks about finances, it talks about science, it talks about many other things. You wouldn't say the Quran is a book of language, even though language was derived from the Quran, right? And the only way that you could categorize the Quran would be then this is just a book of divine authorship, right? It comes out and whatever that comes out of it contributes to mankind at all levels. Full stop. Right? The next closest thing to it will probably be an encyclopedia, right? Which it itself is not able to even encapsulate a part of the Quran, right? So amazingly, again, this claim comes and if you were to evaluate the Quran as such, you will see that it's true. The Quran contributes to the well-being of mankind at all levels. And the last thing we're going to talk about today is something I was quite excited to talk about because I love these kind of things. Divine text must show that prophecies are proven true, right? And of course, like this is very intuitive. We know how it works. Someone says something, it must be true, and then something is proven, right? So I'd just like to pass the time on to the both of you guys. Like, what are some prophecies that have interested you guys? That you guys have heard of for you to be true, and I'm sure that probably increases your iman.
Maybe to start with is something that we kind of didn't really think about, which is the surah of Tabbat yada Abi Lahabin wa tab. Right. So that is one surah whereby it's probably the surah that's quite heavy lah. Really cursing somebody, right? While he was living. Yeah. So and it was already not predicted but prophesied that his place is already going to be in the Jahannam, in the hell of fire, right? Yeah. So that is one thing. While he was still alive, he heard that. He heard that, and all he had to do, right, to debunk the whole entire Quran, right, was to convert to Islam, right? And then he would literally disprove whatever. He proved that surah wrong. It already came down. If he just convert to Islam, then he would say, then your thing, cannot use already. But he didn't. So that's like one of the mu'jizah of the Quran, whereby his eyes were not blind, but his heart is really blind, and Allah knew the condition of his heart, and he chose to bring down that surah. It was, I don't know, something about it is like pretty cool. It happened and it's already prophesied and it came. It's true lah. Yeah, I mean, as for the other prophecies, there are like so many, and I cannot really put my mind around. There's so many things that's happened. A lot of the, the signs of the Qiyamah, a lot of them I cannot even name one. There's like so many right now. So I guess like what my main message is just that it's true, it's the truth. It's just hold on to it lah. There's a lot of things that's gonna come through. So yeah, it's scary lah, but hold on to it. Inshallah.
On that note, about Abu Lahab, and the chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Masad, chapter 111, just some context that makes this prophecy a bit more amazing to believe it actually happened, right? Was that, of course, Abu Lahab, we know he's one of the uncles of Prophet, right? And amazingly, we see that in the stories of the prophets, sometimes their family are their biggest opponents, right? So he was one of the strongest opponents of the Prophet and to the claim of prophethood. And, as one of the strongest opponents of Islam, how would you prove your victory, right? One of the easiest ways to, hey, if you can disprove the Quran, then Islam crumbles, falls apart. Because the context or the premise of Islam is that everything is unified and is true. None of it can be false. Right? So to disprove any part of Islam, you just have to disprove the Quran. So of course he had one of the strongest interests to do so. It wasn't that, disproving the Quran was not part of his priorities, right? And did he try many ways? He did, right? He instigated many times attacks on the Prophet ﷺ, and he had tried various means to prevent the spread of Islam in the early parts of Medina. What is interesting and what is amazing about that chapter of the Quran is that it was actually revealed on the third year of Prophet. Right? Of course, we know that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he had 23 years of prophethood, right? And it was actually revealed very early on in Mecca itself, right? That means there was actually a period of 10 years before the death of Abu Lahab that he was able to disprove the claim, right? That he just had to embrace Islam, like what Zidny said. And if he would just embrace Islam, he would disprove the chapter that was revealed, over the period of 10 years. He had an opportunity of 10 years to do it, right? And of course we know, like, the only thing that was preventing him from doing it, because we also knew that there were hypocrites at that time that didn't believe in Islam, didn't practice Islam, who embraced Islam. He could have been one of them. He didn't do it because of his pride. Allah knows that the pride in his heart would never allow him to embrace Islam, right? So how many things had to fall into place, for that prophecy to be true? And of course, God knows it to be true, right? And how difficult would it have anyone made that prediction for it to be open for 10 years, knowing that there will be hypocrites who enter Islam, but yet he would not. Right? It's just not possible for a man to do so, right? And how about you, like Brother Ijaz, like any prophecies that really spoke out to you, that blew your mind? This blew my mind, when I learned about this chapter as well. SubhanAllah.
In my head, as in, I have more of like scientific evidences that prove that the Quran is true. Off the top of my head, I cannot think of any prophecies, but one of it that was in my mind was also what Brother Zidny said.
Yeah.
About the Abu Lahab thing. That really kind of stuck with me because I found it really interesting. I've never thought of it that way, so I found it really interesting that way. That you can perceive what he did as a way of proving that the Quran is a divine revelation. But yeah, in my mind, I'm mainly thinking about a lot of like scientific evidences that was proven, which is a completely different criteria of its own.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are a lot. You really have to read through the whole Quran if you want to know one another. But if you look at prophecies, I would say there's a lot of hadith that I can think of. One of it is the river Euphrates drying up. That happened quite recently. And another one is how the Arab world itself, when it used to be just full of deserts and everything, and then the Prophet Muhammad said that once everyone will become like all those were herding camels at the time, they'll become rich, they'll start building skyscrapers and everything. And all these were like signs of Qiyamah and time. So we are now seeing a lot of these happening in this day and age itself. With there's a lot of corruption going along. There's a lot of evil that's happening around this world. So I wouldn't say it's the Quran, but as a subset of it, there's a lot of hadith that a lot of prophecies from the hadith that are happening right now that we can see with our own eyes.
Alright, so of course we know prophecies are one of the most like amazing and miraculous proofs of divine authorship. It's also one of the mercies that God has given to us. Especially, some of us think that the fact that there are some things that are yet to be proven it's a part that brings down the Quran as a text. But that's one of the beauties in it, that we are part of a generation that gets to see in fruition. Right, as we have seen, in the recent few decades, some of the signs of the hour, or are we call it the day of judgments, are coming true. How the attire of women has changed. How the different types of Arab Bedouin nations, like what Buddy just mentioned, they were just sheep herders and farmers, but yet now they are competing in terms of their skyscrapers and things like that. We are the generation that gets to verify these prophecies, and this is one of the mercies of God. So, we've covered 4 of these criterion, and adding on to the previous 2 that we've done, this is adds up to 6, right? And once again, these criteria are criteria that any reasonable person will undertake to determine whether a divine text to be divinely authored or not. So, we will go on to the next episode, the final episode of this series, to kind of talk about the last 4, and hopefully there might be some time to talk a little bit on how we then connect with the Quran. And we will inshallah see you there. For now, we'll end this video off by reciting Tasbih Kafara together and Surah Al-Asr. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Al-Asr innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilus salihati wa tawassaw bil haqqi wa tawassaw bis sabr. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.